This is the Krillcast Live. I'm Chris.
And I'm Will.
And I'm Andrew.
And Will's
Chris
about to
asked us
accuse
a
me of
question
being
right
rude.
before we went live, then cut us off before we
Hey, at least I told you guys before we went
Hey.
live that we were going live. All right. Anyways.
What is this, Chris? What is this episode?
Well, you know what it is.
Okay. It's printed and pressed.
And before we get any further, I'm just going to validate that we are live on all of our platforms really quickly. So, Andrew, if you want to introduce the book as soon as we get this sorted, let me make sure.
Alrighty.
I'm pinning the tweet. We're live on Twitter. That is a fact. I just checked.
That is a fact, Jack.
All right. Should be live on Rumble. Let's see.
Let's get ready to rumble.
We are, in fact, live on Rumble. Why is this being weird?
Oh no, Chris. But
Okay, no, we are live. We're live. Yep, we're live on Twitter.
Oh.
How do I pause it?
I don't know, Chris.
Okay.
I don't know. But
Okay,
I think
live on Rumble. Yep.
you already said that.
Yep.
Are we
I think we're
live
good,
everywhere,
man.
Chris? Are we good to start?
Let's do it.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much ready.
So the book we're discussing today is Apocalypse Never: Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All by Michael Shellenberger.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
And do not worry, that polar bear baby does not die in the book.
exactly. So
It only dies because of the amount of paper he used to print this book.
no, okay. For reference to what you just
I'm just
said,
kidding.
Chris, it's only
just kidding.
288 pages of reading. The rest, and then it has a bunch of pages for notes and references because this topic is very sensitive to a lot of people.
Yep. So he has the receipts.
Constantly posts the receipts. You can't argue with a single thing he actually says because he also uses the sources that the people who will argue against him will most likely say are the golden gospel.
And instead of just paraphrasing him, he actually puts this is the actual line.
Yep.
So yeah.
So
I will admit though, his writing style, it got me quite a few times.
It's good.
The book, like,
it's very good.
No. Let me finish what I'm saying. Like, he started with what is widely believed to be true.
Yeah.
And then kind of ended it on a zinger, like, well, that would be nice, but that's not actually true. And then the next like 3 chapters, he demolishes the mainstream narrative.
He
He about lost me. There was one chapter where he's going through. It's like
not
that
for
dead.
you,
No,
Chris.
stop. It's like it's that deadpan delivery where, where he's like just saying, like, gonna like very seriously all the way through the chapter, and then at the end he's like, "Gotcha." I'm like,
in fairness, Chris, the book is not geared towards you.
No.
It's geared towards people who are in the alarmism category and are typically teenagers to 20s. So
okay, so let's summarize the book though.
Well, let's give the background of Shellenberger a little bit too. So before anyone tries to denounce him or anything, his environmentalism qualifications, I guess, his accolades are pretty major, right? He was with Greenpeace. He was a defender of the Environment Awards type of guy. He's been down in South America a ton of times. He's put in the work.
He's been in India. He's
super activist. He kind of flirted with the communists and socialists in South America many times too because of his views on the environment. So he's done it all, right? It's not like he's
if he says something about a place, he's probably been there.
Yeah, that's key, right? So
and not only been there, but he's interviewing people who actually live there, and then he puts them in the book.
Right.
That is also key. He has multiple interviews with people actually in certain circumstances and situations that he tells throughout this book.
Yeah.
So, Will, why did you pick this one? This was
the very point where alarmism has gripped the nation, especially youth. There's a lot of people who actually commit suicide because they think they're going to die in 3 years anyway. So what's the point? And the media, both sides of the political spectrum, say the same crap. And when I first heard about this book, I believe it was published in 2019. Is that correct?
Ooh, that or 2020.
I think it's 2019. I don't know. I bought it right before COVID, so I heard him on a podcast talking about this book, and I was like, "Oh, this sounds really interesting." This guy, again, isn't someone that would necessarily agree with
2020.
politically.
It was
Okay.
copyrighted in 2020.
Isn't someone I necessarily agree with politically, and the topic very much interesting. Like I've said before, I'm a scientist. That's my background. I've gone into a lot of these papers. I know a lot of this research already, and not to say that I've come to my own conclusions, but I've actually read the data, and I realized things didn't add up to what the media is saying, what politics is saying, what the general public says. So seeing someone who has far more experience in this than I do, far more accolades, also say the same things, it obviously got my attention.
Right.
And then he also did the legwork. He didn't just say like, "Oh, I've read the data." He actually shows you the data. He actually goes through and talks to people on the ground, and it's just fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, I would have never picked this book. There's no if not for these two pushing me to read it for this podcast, there is a 0% chance I would have picked up this book to read it. But but that being said, don't do the audiobook for this one unless you want to listen to 12 hours of what probably should be a 6-hour read. Because the narrator has the slowest, drollest
Just
voice.
speed it up, man.
Yeah, you can speed it up.
That's sacrilege. I just listened to the voice.
I will say some of the stuff did surprise me. So there are things that caught me off guard where I realized like, oh, I just took this as fact. I never actually looked into it. So yeah.
With this book, I kind of came from a similar position as you will. I picked it up because I've heard him on multiple podcasts talking, and he had that whole come to Jesus moment on nuclear. So I come from a different side of things than you a little bit. I come more from the energy side. So I went to school for nuclear engineering. I've mentioned that on the podcast before, so I don't mind saying it again. But when you're
electrical engineering over here,
when
two engineers and a scientist.
Yeah, when you go specifically for nuclear, you hear the craziest reasons not to go nuclear all the time. And not just that, you hear all these people who supposedly care about the environment never get on the nuclear bandwagon ever, despite how good it is, right? And this book really is kind of a love story to nuclear. I would say that. He points out a lot of hypocrisy and why we're in the position we're currently in. So it was a really interesting read.
There's a couple of clubs with letters from the
Sierra
military alphabet that
oh, there's that too.
No, military alphabet. Isn't Sierra the S? Or is S something
what?
else? Am I misremembering my phonetic alphabet?
No, you're... Oh, well, I was just saying there's the Sierra Club, which is...
Yeah, that's the club with the military phonetic letter S.
I thought S
Sierra,
was...
isn't it?
Is it Sierra or Sahara? I forget.
It's not Sierra. I understand now what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's why it's Sierra 117. I was getting very confused.
Man, you guys were taking a long time to catch that one. Anyway.
Hey, man.
All right. So just the fact that I would never... there's 3 reasons why I would never pick this up. 1...
Polar bears. I hate them.
No, I actually like polar bears. I just prefer them with Coca-Cola bottles, so there's that. No, I'm just kidding. The fact that it says Apocalypse Never and it has something to do with environmentalism immediately makes me think, oh, God, it's like the Al Gore movie.
Yeah, but it's
never, man. It's the opposite.
It's play on the apocalypse now, but it's apocalypse
I know. But if I'm going to read an apocalyptic book, it's probably something biblical in nature, not environmental in nature. So there's that.
I mean, hey, man, it's technically religious in nature.
Yeah,
kind of.
It's true.
It takes that religious left turn at the end. But it's just not a book that would have stuck out to me to read. It's not in my normal set of books.
I mean, if I'm honest, the cover on this book it doesn't stand out on a shelf. It's very unassuming. So
well, he could have put the Never in like red. That might have stuck out more.
Maybe.
Like there's actually a Twitter account called Apocalypse Never that I almost thought was the book, and in fact it's not. It's a very anti-nuclear.
I just want to point
account.
out, Chris, again, we're the wrong audience technically that he's trying to reach. So he put the cute polar bear that they all claim to love on the cover. That was his goal.
I think one of the let's get into what the book is then. The book is kind of an autobiography of his journey to where he is now from a climate science perspective, and about all the data and the travels he's made.
I mean, I think he more or less inserts himself into the story.
He inserts, I think, a little more. He starts off with the claims.
Yeah.
He goes through a lot of the problems. So after he debunks the claim, so let's just say, for example, the forest fires, melting ice caps, let's say sea turtles, the whales, whatever other thing. He goes through all of these aspects in history. So it's truly telling us the story behind it, and how activism is never really the thing that saves anything. It's usually advancement, using what we have scientifically to come up with a better alternative. So, example, the turtles saved because plastic was just better.
Meanwhile, let's cancel plastic for straws winding up in one turtle's nose. But anyways, I digress.
No, I mean, it's funny, right? The
it is
turtles
ironic.
were saved.
I will say I do prefer the paper straws. So I'm not really sure why that hasn't caught on yet. I think
I hate paper straws.
So the problem with paper straws, I'll tell you right now, Will, the biggest problem with paper straws, kids. You give a kid a paper straw, it's gonna break it immediately. The plastic straw is way harder to break, way more durable. Kids can drink out of them much easier.
Don't give your kids straws, Chris.
Hey man, I would just prefer
might wind up in
metal
their nose.
straws. Let's go there. Yeah, so he goes through that, right? All of the different claims, how hurricanes, tornadoes, how they always claim that we're getting more and more of them, deadlier. I mean, it's blatantly a false stat.
You have more people, then natural disasters affect more people.
Well, not just that, but flood insurance is a thing that was developed later on. Air conditioning was a thing that was developed later on, and that has allowed people to move into hotter and closer.
I was just simply stating the fact, Andrew, that if you have more people in a given area, a natural disaster will automatically affect more people.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are physically more people in that area.
Yeah, but it's more than the metric they like to use isn't necessarily people. It is financial cost. And that is directly tied to the flood insurance, because people wouldn't build as expensive of buildings in a lot of these locations if they weren't going to get the flood insurance bailout. It would be too cost prohibitive without government assistance in that field. That's where I was kind of going with it, because they like to reference how expensive everything is. They go by billions of dollars of damage.
You're saying at the start of the book he covers natural disasters, and that's why we're talking about this first.
Yeah. So in the very beginning, he goes through all the claims about how this is an apocalypse, but it's not. So that's where the Earth's lungs aren't burning. All of those. That's where he goes first, and then after that, he goes into the
how the Amazon rainforest is basically carbon zero. Or net zero.
That one was interesting to me. I was like, oh, that makes total sense now that I think about it.
Yeah, from what I understand, the more oxygen dense, or rather the better regenerative cycle of oxygen comes from the ocean rather than the forest.
Algae does it. That's insane. Cyanobacteria. I mean, I've known that forever, but the idea that the rainforest is essentially net zero, it's like, oh yeah, I guess that
the only thing you lose by cutting down the rainforest is the diverse species of plants and animals.
I mean, there's also the filtering process, which he doesn't really get into, where it does filter the air, so there is more than just oxygen going on. But I don't want to get into this yet.
Yeah.
There's a lot to that chapter that's very, very interesting.
All right, well, then we'll start with this. Not the end of the world. You're talking about natural disasters, Andrew, flood insurance, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. One of the things that stuck out to me was that the human population is very good at adapting and responding to natural disasters. So even if the natural disaster is worse or bigger or affects more people, there are more people out there to come up with more ingenuitive ways to get out of those scenarios and issues. Like, for example, look how they strengthened Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. Like, they have redone that whole area to make it withstand a stronger storm or hurricane. So, like, the human species, the human population is very adaptive with these things.
Well, I can't remember. Does he talk about subsidence versus sea level rise?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Because he talks about how building near the coast and building up the dike walls and that kind of stuff. So maybe not.
So I can't remember if he does talk about it, but paired with all of that building closer to the shore and everything, people need to realize that subsidence is like 10 times as worse than actual sea level rise. So even though the sea level is rising, it's been rising at a very steady rate for the past century. It's not actually fluctuating. It's not rising faster or anything. What people seem to mistake is that all of these, so you referenced New Orleans, for example, that they're sinking at a rate that's like 9 times faster than sea level rise. And it's obviously going to seem like the end of the world if you're not doing what the Netherlands did and building a lot of dikes that are super high tech. But that's a human created problem that's very localized environmental like catastrophe. It's not actually a climate issue per se.
Well, yeah, when you build in a land that's sinking, for example, there have been industrial plants built in, like for example, Michigan, and they had to measure the rate at which the building was sinking, and they actually determined it a lost cause for building that particular structure, and instead converted it to something else because there's no way you're going to build something that important that's sinking at a rate of like 9 inches per year.
Exactly,
it's pretty insane. But that's just one example. Like these are localized issues that are being used on a wide scale to promote general climate alarmism.
Yeah, and it's tough, right? Because things get very what's the word? I'm blanking on it right now. It's sensationalized by the media all the time, and they just run with whatever headline is the easiest for them to just get out first. It's not about being right and correct with your information. It's about what you can say right now to get the headlines and the clicks.
Well, what grabs people's eyes more? We have a localized issue in Louisiana, or the world is ending, the earth is sinking.
Exactly. And I think he does a very good job of discussing that in this book.
He does, yeah. He I know he's gone in and asked different writers of their articles and said, like, hey, here's the information. Did you have this available to you? Would you make the correction? And in some cases, he found that they were willing to make the correction. In other cases, he found they said, no, we just want this article to roll. And the funny thing is that some of these article writers, they play the game where you say, is it this and this? Well, then my article is technically not a lie. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you're not telling a lie physically with what you wrote. You're telling a lie with what the reader is going to say based on what you said. Because you can say the same thing in different words and get a different response from the reader.
Right. We already discussed the Earth's lungs aren't burning aspect.
But Will does want to get deeper into that.
Yeah, Will, you're more in this field than us, but
just for the record, celebrity endorsements for climate are nothing. They mean nothing.
Oh yeah,
they definitely mean nothing.
Just think though.
None of those people are scientists. You have three people.
Celebrity endorsements are really anything. All it does is like it's great for some things because it actually gives awareness to certain products that actually are very beneficial. But
I'm not saying that bringing the attention to these issues is a bad thing. The problem is the best intentions can sometimes lead to the biggest disasters.
Yeah. They're definitely covering up.
If you go in with good intentions and you say something that's just wrong on all practical levels, you're not helping.
Yeah, well, it went from a celebrity going somewhere or experiencing something and like having a personal connection to it and then like wanting to speak out about it and like create whatever charities. There's so many old school celebrities that did that and it did it to a great effect. Now it's just clout. It's like I stamp my name on climate change. My name is Leonardo DiCaprio, but I'm going to fly my private jet everywhere and not give a shit about the environment. I'm just going to say I do.
Right.
My favorite part about this though is how we forget how vital forest fires are, especially in these regions that they always reference. The whole problem with the fires is we don't let them burn.
Yes.
And the second problem is we've built into the locations that regularly go ablaze. So all of the attention on, it's always on fire. Well, don't build your mansion here. If only poor people live there, no one would give a crap.
And the thing is, they're always saying like we need to emulate the natives.
No,
Native
it's
Americans
true though,
do this.
Chris. It's
the,
true.
The biggest issue, this is the issue. The issue is that they are preventing fire from taking care of what nature would normally do.
And they've built expensive houses there.
Stop. They've let the ground collect all this firewood fuel. They won't let the fires burn out all that excess firewood that has fallen down, and the leaves and all the nasty fuel that has fallen from the top of the trees down to the bottom of the forest. If you don't let that naturally take care of itself with fire, well, then guess what? You're going to have a bigger fire in like 20 years from the time you start.
It also doesn't return nutrients to the soil. You need the potash for the trees to grow more strong. So there's a lot of things going on there. They're also
and also depleting
nutrients.
There's also the ones where the pine cones don't open unless they've been through a fire.
I mean, we have that in Michigan. It's like the wettest state ever.
Yeah. So it's a very vital aspect to the rebirth of forests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nobody ever talks about the natural forest cycle of clearing itself up.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, too, when you allow that debris to build up, you're causing it even more likely to, like, where the fire isn't going to be a rapid only kill undergrowth and stuff. It's going to now kill the big trees because there's enough fuel. Right, so you're actually making it worse for the large growth that shouldn't be getting killed by the fires in the first place.
Yeah, and he also brings up a really good point here. Most, if not all, of these forest fires are caused by us throwing cigarette butts, being an idiot with fire,
purposeful
arson,
which
happens a
which
lot,
is very
actually.
common.
If you actually look into this, there's so many arsonists that purposely do this. It's crazy.
In California, it's a lot. There's a lot. I think, it was, I forget. I'm not going to say a percentage. I just know that it was a significant number. Over half were probably arson.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think the other aspect of this that's so misleading is the footage you see where they show, like, they'll fly over a new patch of burned down forest on purpose for the emotional connection without explaining why, how, what. There's no explanation. It's just, look at this desolation. And it's like, well, yeah, but desolation is part of nature. Like, nobody looks at the lion hunting a gazelle and says, oh, poor gazelle. No, it's nature. I mean, somebody might, but generally speaking,
people do.
Generally speaking, though, like, they accept that because that's how nature does.
Yeah, well, they always forget to show the part where everything grows back stronger.
Yeah.
So that's annoying. And also, so this is only kind of related, but in Australia, there's actually an eagle that has learned to create its own forest fires, and it will use that. Yeah, it'll pick up branches that are on fire, move the fire around, and cause animals to scatter so they're easy to catch. True story. You can look it up. It's super cool.
Well, speaking of that,
fire has been a hunting method.
People talk about how fire was discovered by man. But I'm just thinking about this, like, dude, fire is all around us. Like, you can find fire all over the place.
Yeah, well, it wasn't discovered, but we can harness it and control it to some effect.
That's what I'm saying. Like, the idea that we somehow discovered fire. Like, people always say, man discovered fire. I'm like, no, man found fire somewhere and used it. Like,
yes.
Well, I mean, we did have to discover how to make it on our own.
Well, yeah, that was part of the just the learning process of the human condition was figuring out how to make fire, because fire makes everything better.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Castaway. I figure I know how to do it now. It's like, I have made fire.
Watch Survivor.
Yeah.
All right, you guys want to move on to the plastic straws since we
we kind of teased it a bit, but as far
I thought it was. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we teased it a little bit. We teased it a little bit earlier with the plastic straws, the turtles, the seashell, their shells being very plastic, right? In nature, they could be used to make glasses and all sorts of things. Just like whales were used for all sorts of. Basically, the whole whale was useful in some aspect, but thanks to plastics and just petroleum products in general, our oceans have been massively relieved from the fishing just pressure for industrial product purposes.
Well, yeah, look at the whales.
Yeah, I mean, whales weren't saved by activists. They just weren't. It became cheaper to make things using plastics. The same thing can be said for rhinos and elephants. You don't need ivory anymore to make your chess set or your billiard balls or whatever it is you're looking for. You don't need it.
Although I have seen how beautiful an ivory chess set
Oh,
is.
it is beautiful.
They do look very nice in person.
Yeah.
I don't own one, but I've seen one. I'm serious. I really don't.
No,
I got the Star Wars chess set.
Hey man, I can appreciate the beauty of it as an art.
Yes.
I'm just saying that plastic has relieved the pressure for everyone
has.
to have it, and it has made it truly the luxury product it should be.
Have either of you been to Disney World?
Yes.
Have you been in the Animal Kingdom Safari?
Yes.
Did you do the little chase where you had to hunt down the poachers?
No, not that part. No.
Okay, so there is a part when you're on safari where you're going through the guys like deer, the giraffe, and lion, blah blah blah, and then all of a sudden they go to a radio car like, oh my gosh, someone's hunting the elephants, and then like swerve off the road. It's all dramatic and stuff, and then like you go and hunt down the freaking poachers, and it really ingrains in you it's like how evil these poachers are. But then when you become an adult, you're like, okay, well, why are they doing this?
Because they don't have a choice.
They don't have a choice. The thing is, like, you've seen the programs, like they literally get hunted down with
almost every crisis business that exists is the occupation of somebody in dire straits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if you think of a crisis occupation, something you would never do unless your life was in chaos and crisis.
Yeah, well, this book does a really good
that's
job
why these people are doing
highlighting some of these things. So like, these people are not evil; they're trying to survive. They're not living in an air conditioned house right now. You can just drive down the road, get groceries, or have it freaking delivered to you now. They like literally what they can grow, what they can steal. That's what they eat.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not just that. Elephants are poached not just because of the ivory.
And they're also destroying the crops.
They're extremely destructive. They don't care about your fence. There's so much stress between the local population and a wildlife refuge in Africa because the wildlife refuge is not even capable of keeping the wildlife on the refuge.
Yep.
And they can't do anything about it when it's still on the refuge. So they eventually resort to poaching to prevent them from damaging their crops.
Yeah, well, they bring up baboons too, where the baboons will rip up the sweet potatoes. They also baboons will just straight up murder people.
Yeah, they'll take a baby.
Oh
2 seconds. Yeah.
Well, what's crazy about that? So that baboons can recognize the hierarchy of a human society. So they go into these tribal villages and they can recognize who is the tribal leader, who's the tribal leader's wife, yada 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 down the line, and they will steal the baby from the lowest ranking member because they assume that person cannot retaliate.
That's actually pretty fascinating.
It's super fascinating. It sucks and it's terrible, but it is really interesting.
Well, we've momentarily lost Chris.
We can't scroll down this page, can we? Or do you?
Yeah, no, he has it. But we can still discuss it. Oh, he's back.
Okay.
I mean, we already discussed the whales as well. Greenpeace is terrible. I despise them.
Okay, no, I do want to get to the sixth extinction.
Yeah.
So maybe we should explain what the sixth extinction is defined as.
Yeah.
It's essentially...
Isn't it the concept that the human extinction is next?
No,
it's everything we've extincted.
It's basically we're killing everything. Is what we are the meteor. We are the climate change. Yeah,
it's the idea that the extinction begins with us and ends with us all essentially dying out because we destroyed the planet.
Well, we're the extinction factor, is what it's trying to say.
Human consumption is the extinction.
Humans are the meteor. That is the essence of it.
Yeah. Now, and it's true that we have caused some species to go extinct, but go on.
But there's a natural cycle where the planet rebounds and there's new species every day that we haven't discovered yet even. And so to say that one extinction is going to end the planet because of humans is to ignore all the other species that are popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not really how that works, but the idea is
I'm just saying there are new. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm not a bio guy. Okay.
Yeah. Well, new species don't just pop up like that. That's not how it works. But the concept is that that we are obviously killing species. That's a proven fact. We know that there was some before. They're not there anymore. But this really gets to the point of biodiversity and how important biodiversity is to the ecosystem function. And it ends up, there's a lot of redundancy. So most of the time, you only need one or two species that perform a certain function in an ecosystem for the ecosystem to function. We have been very good at killing off the redundancy. So no ecosystem has collapsed. You can't say that there is a single one. There's some that we've removed forests and we've removed the habitat, which is a little bit different, and I think is far more dangerous than actually having a species go extinct. But yeah, what was the prompt for this? For my little diatribe there.
Oh, I was just saying, like, there are new species every day, and yes.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we are
species on
discovering new
cycles.
species, but that's not because they're becoming new species. They're just already there.
And when we change,
I mean, there are new species, though. Will we do find new adaptations taking place and different things?
Yes. So the new adaptations, they're not new species. That's not how that works.
Depends on how much they adapt.
It's a lot of time, Chris. A lot of time must pass.
You can have punctuated equilibrium, but that we have not observed. Well, okay, we have like bacteria and fish and trees that are super effing weird, but that's like not the norm. I think you're probably thinking of like vertebrates. Vertebrates don't just start popping up and like they're new species like that. That's not how that works.
Yeah, I'm probably thinking more about plants.
Plants are super weird. They can actually have three parents. They can change, like species can intermingle. There's like no actual definitive species line in a lot of things. Bacteria can literally change species within its own lifetime.
Yeah. Let me see here. I think that without knowing more about biodiversity, unless Will has more to say, I probably shouldn't speak more on this topic.
It's an interesting read. As far as chapters go, it's an interesting one.
It's a shame that we're losing species. Don't
it is
get
a
me
shame,
wrong.
But we're also
yeah, dude. I want the Meg back. So
yeah, but that was
millions
of years before us, Chris.
No. There's some potential timelines that are wrong.
There is no potential timelines.
yeah. Mike's talking about the things classified as new species. Oh, I misread that. I thought he meant like classified, like top secret, like the goat spider thing that Mr. Jones likes to talk about.
So there are things. Like the thing is, the species concept is already kind of lame. It's just humans trying to organize things that are hard to organize. Yeah. Most things can hybridize. I'm going to get myself in trouble. Not most things. A lot of things can hybridize. Basically, when you think of hybrid, you think of like a liger, which is like this weird abnormality that can't breed. But that's not true for a lot of things. Like the line between one species and the next is very thin.
Isn't that actually how often about ligers? I thought
how often do lions and tigers get it on to make
humans?
Ligers? Humans force that?
Yes.
Well, they brought them together, but
there are lions and tigers in the same environments, but they would not normally breed.
Well, isn't the truth actually that the female ligers are actually hyper fertile? Yes. I thought that was the truth.
The males are infertile. That's why it's an inviable species.
So what if a female liger mated with a tiger or a lion?
But think about it, Chris. It would never be a self-sustaining species. You'd have to constantly go back.
It's just a holdover, and it's a holdover where you get more females that are hyper fertile to help eventually it's probably just going to revert back to a tiger or a lion mostly.
This is a great question. This is also it's debatable through. It's a species by species basis. Basically, you have to have enough isolation. If you're able to do the genetic material, enough genetic mutations, most things we don't have that information yet, and behaviorally different. So behaviorally isolated. So say like a bird is calling differently from another bird. If there's a little population within that population where they only are mating with the ones that call a certain way, if we can show that that's been happening for a while, that's probably going to be considered a new species. Mm-hmm. Things like that. But again, just because they're no longer breeding doesn't mean they're not capable of doing so. And if we bred them in captivity, you would have no idea that they're a different species. So there's a lot of examples of things like that.
Yeah, captivity really changes the behavior of animals.
Oh, it definitely does.
Yeah.
There's quite a few animals that die in captivity, and they can only keep them in captivity for so long.
Yes. Well, there's higher order mammals, which is a very archaic term. What I mean is the ones that are clearly free thinking. So things like, apes, the other apes, they get bored and they will actually commit suicide. So you have to, like, it's terrible. So for a long time, they just let this happen, and they would keep them in cement pits and things, and it's just terrible. But now zoos are really into conservation. That's one of the good things about this Greenpeace and things like that. But they give them enrichment activities, and they like hide games for them. They allow, like in Toledo Zoo, if you stand by the chimpanzee exhibit, they actually have a levee where they can splash the guests, and the chimpanzees freaking love it. Because they'll like pretend that like they don't see you, and they'll kind of like back up into the corner, and like all the kids are like, "Oh my gosh, its butt's so weird looking," and then suddenly they'll like pull the lever and splash everyone, and then it starts laughing. It's great. It's great to see. Yeah.
The funny, I think this was in this chapter. If I'm wrong, then just correct me. But I'm pretty sure it's in this chapter where he talks about how conservationists are very good at maintaining a population number, but not increasing it. And I found that fact very interesting because all along I thought that conservation work would lead to population growth, and it really doesn't.
You know who tends to lead to population growth? Hunters.
You're gonna have to expound.
I mean, I know what you're getting
at. Hunting. Okay, hunters, when they do conservation, they want the population to increase, and there's usually a profit motive, either through their enjoyment or you're actually selling tickets to hunt. And there's an experience factor there. But hunters versus environmentalists tend to be way more successful at conservation efforts.
Well, the thing is, we have decades of research showing that hunters are very successful. So, as an avid hunter, basically the reason why we have deer, turkey, quail, dove,
rabbit, anything basically,
is because of hunters. So they recognized that the farmers were killing them and poisoning them. Just like in the 70s, deer were almost extinct in Ohio. I think turkeys were locally extinct in Ohio. And
I got 30 of them roaming.
There was no regulation. You can shoot them whenever you wanted to. And the thing is, like, the moment that they walked into your property, you deemed them as a harmful creature. They got shot. That's why they went extinct. That was a problem, obviously. There's a lot of ecological function that I could get into with these animals, but basically the hunters started making these organizations like Quails Unlimited, Whitetail Unlimited, things like that. And through those efforts, where again, partnering with the state, having hunting license, actually having a hunting season, now there's deer freaking everywhere. There's more deer now than there's ever been. There's more turkeys now than there's ever been. The bald eagles, which is also a partnership through hunters, but
later topic too.
Yeah, they are booming. Yeah, but that's also because the farmers.
It's because of environmentalists. Yeah. But the birds of prey in general are at risk again, and we'll get to that topic later. But,
all right. So let's get to one of his most egregious chapter titles. Sweatshops save the planet.
They do.
They
really do.
Is an uncomfortable topic.
It's uncomfortable only because of the nature of the sweatshops can be too exploitive. That's the reason it's uncomfortable. But the fact that the factories going to these countries is not a bad thing at all. It's very good. And
there's two aspects to this, Andrew, though. Like, the first one is, like, this actually does bring poverty countries or countries suffering from poverty up a notch and allows them to get some level of monetary worth in the country to build new things in that country.
Yeah.
It fuels an economy. Whether you want to look at it as a sweatshop or a golden ticket to prosperity is, it's a choice. And then people will work these jobs that are terrible to build themselves. I mean, it happens everywhere. Everywhere that new industry rolls into, whether it's internal or external, will eventually lead to some level of prosperity, unless it's exploitative to the point of almost, that word we don't like to use on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a deeper thing, a deeper aspect to this topic, and that is energy abundance. I think they're in the sweatshops bring a form of energy abundance because there's something driving the build out of energy production in that country. Prior to that, they will always be a zone of energy poverty. So they won't have anything that builds out a grid without a factory. Without the income from said factory, how are you going to pay for the hospital and everything? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a form of subsidy that allows them to build a first world country electrical grid that doesn't have brownouts and blackouts. I know California can't seem to figure this out as a first world country, but it's a very important thing when you look at how many medicines need a stable grid, food preservation, for example, as well, and just how all of that raises the standard of living beyond anything they could imagine before the sweatshops show up. And as far as human history goes and industrialization, fashion, textile production has always just been this constant migration across to the lowest paying region there could be. So it's, I don't know. I don't think it's as bad.
Mass textile production has always done that. That's accurate.
I mean, textile production, once the Industrial Revolution happened, migrated from England to the United States, and it has constantly migrated since then.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's ever since mass industrial production of textiles has begun, it's always moved to the cheapest area. I agree 100% on that.
But that's also a story of energy abundance becoming the thing too, because it always builds out your grid.
Because you need the energy. You need some form of energy to produce on the level of an industrial scale.
Yes.
And without having a baseline, you can't expand that. You can't build upon it. You can't do anything. So you're stuck with what the human body can do, or what you can do mechanically, until you build a grid where you can produce things with electrical power.
I mean, and that's also a way to, increase the pie that is the economy especially for these regions. Think of how much time they have to dedicate to just basic needs when they don't have that electricity to hold food and preserve food for the next day. And
I mean, I still think that's a valuable piece of knowledge to know how to preserve food outside of a refrigerator or freezer. I think that's.
I mean, there's some food you can't preserve, Chris.
I understand. I'm just saying, like, in general, I think that the loss of that knowledge is bad overall. But I do think it's good to have the availability of a freezer.
I'm just saying. We're just talking about a refrigerator. Having a refrigerator in a city, not everyone can have a root cellar, right?
Yep.
It's not like. It allows you to maximize your utilization of space.
Yeah.
Of land.
The other thing is not everybody can have the amount of salt required to preserve some foods either.
That as well.
Because salt is also something that is better produced in an industrial nation. Mining is always better when you can do it industrially.
I don't understand how we can't suck salt out of the ocean more efficiently, but
desalination. I mean, I see salt from saltwater on store shelves a lot more often now than I used to.
Yeah, well, the thing is, all you have to do is let it evaporate, and boom, you have it. I don't understand why
the biggest issue with the saltwater take is that desalination needs to be done quickly to make it a viable alternative to fresh water.
Well,
they haven't done it quickly in a lot of parts of the world.
Part of the problem is the brine mixture that is the leftover. It's not so much anything but that, because people complain about desalination because you dump the brine back into the ocean and kill a bunch of things where that flows, because it's not being diluted.
It's super concentrated. Well, they should do it in the Arctic then, in the Antarctic, because that's what the glaciers are doing now. You should see the salt that pours off those things. There's tons of video of it. It's crazy concentrated salt. When the ice freezes, it's basically just all those salt leaches right out of those glaciers. Ice caps.
They should just dump that brine into. What's that lake?
The Salt Lake.
Yeah, just dump it there. Take all that brine and dump it where it already is dead. You're not growing anything in that place. I mean, I'm taking a simple solution to a very complicated problem as a joke.
Yes.
Yeah, you'd have to travel and get it there and stuff. So
Yeah.
This might be Andrew's favorite chapter coming up next, though.
We already kind of discussed it a little bit.
This is important, though, is the fact
It
that
is.
the thing is, we all know this inherently because at least when we were in school, we went over the transition from whale oil to oil.
I don't think they discuss it as much these days.
So this is super important. Is the fact that we used to use whales for many things, but one of which was for oil, for burning like lamps and such, and then we were able to transition to fossil fuels.
Yeah,
and that
kerosene, and then
was so much more efficient and readily available. And to this point, greed saved the whales because you could produce so much more, so much cheaper, make the profit margins much higher, and because of that, whales were saved.
Yeah, I mean, but even fishing poles, man, like fishing poles, fishing line, all of that was tied to whales.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think of everything that was involved with whales, plastics, fossil fuels, saved whales. Greenpeace can pretend like they did something. All they were was annoying. Like,
they brought mass attention to themselves and raised a bunch of money.
Maybe got Free Willy made as a movie. I don't know. Yeah. But
no, they probably were more likely to have produced there's a movie called The Cove I have on my shelf over here.
I think the thing is, like, getting attention on this was a good thing. But there's never ever follow up where it's like, look at the success of the fact that we transitioned over to fossil fuels, and like look at the whales have rebounded. There's quite a few whales now. There are some that are still very much struggling, like the ones in the Cape of California. But
and there's new issues for whales as well.
Yes. But again, there's no follow-up. There's never that second documentary where you get to learn about, okay, what's the next thing we need to work on? It's always like it's the same crap, and they never want to fix anything.
And I would add to that,
I will say there's a different film called Blackfish that pretty much destroyed SeaWorld.
I'll add.
I don't think they should be in SeaWorld.
What was that?
I don't think they should have
orcas,
whales, orcas and stuff in SeaWorld.
Well, that's what I'm saying. When you take away the what was the main whale's name again?
I forget.
I don't remember.
Oh man. Anyways, that film, pretty much on its own, with the viral popularity it somehow found on Netflix, pretty much destroyed all of the chance that SeaWorld had to continue on with their orcas in the park, whatever you want to call it.
Which again, like I'm totally fine with, because
it's
they're
crazy,
wicked smart. It's like having people perform in really suboptimal conditions, and it is terrible.
Well, they killed several trainers.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, wouldn't
crazy.
You if you're trapped? My point is that you can't think of them as like a fish or like some kind of lowly animal. They're really freaking smart.
Mm-hmm. And they're predators. As far as predators can go. Like,
well,
they're significant.
There's a reason why they're called killer whales, is because they hunt like wolves.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually really cool to see those videos.
It's really cool, but also like
terrifying.
Yeah. If you're in a small boat, you don't want to be anywhere near them. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah, Tilikum was the one that killed people. And then let's see here. I just don't remember what the orca at SeaWorld was called. I know it was something that's in the back of my head right now. I just can't think of what they called it.
Just real quick to add on to what you were saying, Will, is especially when it goes back to just not learning the lessons, right? We never go back to something we call it as a concern and learn how we overcame it especially usually through technology advancement. It's always, oh, well, we saved the whales or we saved whatever. And usually those people had nothing to do with it except for just be annoying. And someone was already working on a way to make something better anyway. I don't really see how Greenpeace has ever been particularly influential in saving something.
Mm-hmm.
I've yet to see anything in that regard. I've seen how they've caused more destruction by far than they have saved anything. I forget, what's the chapter about have your steak and eat it too? I'm assuming it's
before we get there, I have one more thing to say about this one.
Yeah.
What I found so interesting is as they go through and they talk about the way to kill off an industry practice is by finding a better industry practice is so telling because despite everything previously done or said, the thing that beat the use of whale oil was better product found elsewhere. That was easier to use, higher efficiency.
That's how it always works.
Well,
It's always that way. Yeah.
The only time that didn't work, Andrew, is when?
What are you talking about? It's
when did the higher density energy?
Oh, you're talking about nuclear, but it's tricky, right? It is still winning. It's just not.
It is still winning,
yet.
but
it's been demonized.
Yes, and that's the only way you could possibly stop a higher density energy from taking over. Is by demonizing it in the broad sense.
We're seeing it right now too, Chris, with electric cars. They are inferior in every way to a gasoline car. Inferior.
Except for that one really cool thing going on, an experiment in Australia that, you know what I'm talking about?
Some random thing. Go on.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty cool what they're doing over there. But that is being blocked now by
what I don't understand
the same
they have
people.
Hydrogen cars. I've seen them drive.
That's what I'm talking about. The hydrogen cars are actually good.
Well, GM has had them since like 2011 or something.
They can't get them in. Regulations blocking it.
If you didn't know,
Shamu, that's the SeaWorld thing. Shamu.
Wow, that was random.
Sorry, it was driving me nuts.
If you didn't know, Will, part of the Great Recession and the bailouts towards the auto industry, the government basically selected electric vehicles as the favorite, and a lot of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles got shelved as a result. So that is a big thing. Dude,
this is about cattle reduction.
I will address that comment. So Mike Little said that is not true. Just because electric cars aren't saving the world, Tesla smoke cars in their class. I mean, okay, let's do an endurance test. Let's go across the country. Who gets there first? Any car that's not a Tesla or that's not electric, okay? You forget that the purpose of a car is travel, distance, what can get something from A to B most efficiently, time-wise.
If you're doing all city traveling, sure, an electric car might be convenient, but it's also more expensive.
But it's niche.
And it's niche. Yeah.
It's niche. You can't take that. You have to specifically plan to get from city A to city B, because it's not going to have the range, right?
The range, I think the top out range for an electric car in optimal conditions was about 400 miles.
It's not just the range; it's the amount of time it takes to charge. So if you're going to do a true test of speed, the gas car has to win because it takes the shortest amount of time with the superchargers is 30 minutes. You can fill up any car in a couple. So just
okay, but Mike, here's the thing: you don't do that, but not everybody is trying.
That is such a city perspective. It's not even funny.
Let me just stop you right there. So
you have to keep in mind that most of our goods are still transported via semi trucks, so it's going to have to compete on that stage. There are electric semi trucks, but they are currently less efficient.
Okay, Mike. All right, when is the last time you guys did that in a day? Okay, I'll be honest. I have a trip planned in this month. I will be driving 12 hours. That's what I'm driving, one way, one day. I can't do that with an electric car. I just can't.
Okay, you know what my biggest complaint with electric cars is right now, Andrew? I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I cannot find a single electric car on the entire market that is convenient for my family. Well, find me an electric car that can fit 4 children easily with car seats in the back and all their goods and everything we need to take with them to go on a travel trip. You can't find it. It doesn't exist. It's not safe for the kids. It's made for families of like two adults and 2 kids. That's what they're made.
Chris, do you know what?
Sorry, one more thing about the battery. The batteries is also a myth. So these batteries do not last for very long.
That's
you have to replace the entire car instead of just
They don't do replacement batteries. They don't do them.
They
And
do.
the
They're
thing is,
expensive as
we
all
keep
get
using
out.
these things as saying that we're going to be energy independent.
No.
We have to use a fuel. All these batteries are assembled and mined and built in China. So we're just shifting our focus from importing oil from South America and from Middle East to relying even more on China, which again, there's a lot of reasons. The thing is, I want electric cars to succeed because I think they're cool. I hate the smell of gaseline. I like the
the way
idea
gas
of plugging
smells,
my
actually.
car in. I like that. But
So-
right now, like forcing that technology on the market is not the right way of doing it. You have to have a natural evolution like we've had in every other industry. When something better comes along, it takes over. That's how it works.
Okay,
That's why we don't use steam.
Can we do one more thing here? I want to talk about the fact that there is the aspect of energy independence. So, like, when you talk about individual energy independence, different than a country having energy independence.
Yes.
For example, I can store as much gasoline as I can buy a container that will store it.
It's terrible.
I cannot. I understand. Just stop. Farmers do it all the time. Farmers store giant tanks of gasoline on their
They're
property.
also going through it really quickly.
Can I please finish
No,
my thought
Chris,
without you
I don't want
interjecting?
Go on, sorry.
What you cannot store on your property easily, at least not right now, because there's no infrastructure for it, is electricity. You cannot easily store it.
Batteries stuck. That's the problem.
If the grid is down, I can still go and get gasoline out of a can in the back of my garage, fill up my car, and go somewhere.
Chris, they're going to tell you batteries. I know batteries suck, though. They just really suck.
Batteries, even at the highest capacity, a battery does not have the same level of use that a can of gasoline does.
Also, going back to saving the world, I realize you said just because they're not saving the world doesn't mean they're inferior, but those batteries that we're talking about, even the ones for solar power, they like once you get rid of them, they leach a shitload of chemicals into the environment. They're really bad.
Will, on top of that, let's just go into the problem with batteries real quick. So, the cars,
I think
right?
we should save this for the green discussion.
Fine, we can. I just don't let me.
The happiest thing he needed to was a vegetarian argument. He was talking about how. Yeah, it's. I mean, the whole point is like
kill way more animal life than people who have a ranch.
By not demanding beef, you actually caused the death of more cows. Somehow through the loose logic in his writing here, and from what I understand, when they keep demanding I mean, it's a good thing they demand better treatment for the animals. I will not disagree with that, but at the same time, when you ask for like wild or like free range animals, well, now that's going to require them a lot more land for the same amount of cattle. When in reality, a lot of these animals are getting better treatment than they would have gotten in the wild.
So the thing to remember here is
I'm not talking about the chicken factories. Those are
no.
disgusting.
The thing to remember here is the vast majority of livestock, if you were to eliminate meat from the diet, would not exist. They would be killed. They would have, like, as a herd, they would have to just be culled because they're not going to be able to take care of themselves. They're going to just starve because they don't know how to take care of themselves. So if you ban meat, you're actually just issuing a death sentence for all of the animals that you're claiming to care about and want to save. That is the heart of the issue. And at the same time, vegans are completely ignorant of the fact that to feed themselves with all of the vegetables and fruits that they need, you need to destroy tons of land mass and plow it under and turn it into farm fields that are just dirt for like half the year. And then you layer on the pesticides and everything. Otherwise, you're just creating an insect utopia.
Well,
the thing is, we have no good answer to this. So, honestly, we have enough meat in this country, and we don't need to be really considering this or worrying about our infrastructure. It's developing nations that are starting to eat a lot more protein because once you become wealthier, you eat more protein. But again, to your point, we have plenty of land for this. This actually is not creating that big of a deal with sustainable practices. Like, this is not a goalpost that people should really be that concerned about.
Well, the other thing
I thought this was part of this chapter.
that I thought was interesting to this is interesting for me, is that when you start to try and say, okay, we want all green food, right? Well, guess what? The amount of farmland you would need to cover the same amount of energy dense food that meat provides is going to take up at least as much space. You're not getting your forest back by doing that.
And that's the key right there, Chris, what you just said. Energy density. You get
in fact, this
way
whole
more
book
energy.
is a lot of discussion on energy density.
Yeah, no, that's the main theme, right? Energy density. And when it comes to the food you eat, being a meat eater brings a lot more energy and nutrient density than a lot of the alternatives.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. So I think that was a point that I might have missed earlier to say is, like, just because you go from one source of food to another does not guarantee the land will be reverted back to forest, because you still need the farmland to grow the crops.
Yeah, another thing on this is that for the U.S., so like obviously we're speaking with the most experience from the U.S.
Yeah.
The ag industry and the farm industry has done an amazing job of recycling materials. So there's a ton of waste products that go from one industry, gets shifted to another industry, and then back
like
and
manure.
Forth. So manure goes to agriculture, so we're actually growing food in that, and then from that there's a lot of leftover profit, like the leftover things from like wheat production, things that goes right back into the feed for the cows. So if you actually removed an entire pillar of our ag industry, our farming would actually collapse, just because of how interconnected it is. You can definitely dial back, and I think over the years we'll probably dial back on the amount of cattle that we have in this country, just because we can. Honestly, we're very close to just manufacturing that, but removing it entirely, I think is at this point probably not. It's not going to be easy.
I will never eat manufactured beef. That's disgusting.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
I would never say never. If it actually is something where they test it for like 30 years and no one dies from it, I don't give a shit. The only reason why I eat what I have now is because that's what's available to me now. And no one, like when you're growing up, you never like, I'm going to look into this. What is the history behind this particular food? No one did that. It just happens to be that most of the things we eat are good for us already. And the thing is, a lot of it was shit. So like people actually looking into it with like the pesticides, the herbicides, like that was terrible for people. And it's still
to disagree on this one, Will.
What?
The other thing
what do you agree to disagree on?
Well, what do you mean by manufacturing the meat? Will, are you talking about the lab-grown cultures of meat, or are you talking about
basically you're taking it from a cow and you're just growing it, a la like The Island? Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah,
they grow people. It's the same like that.
Nope,
I mean,
it
all depends. I won't say never.
I'll buy my own farm and I'll raise
highly
my own
unlikely
cows
to
instead
in my lifetime.
Also,
just so you know, you're probably already eating cloned cows. That's probably a fact, because there are cloned cows in Texas that.
So to Mike Little's comment here about,
you can't just trade one
energy
product
density.
for another.
He does have a point. So you lose energy as you're going up the food chain.
Well, you forget though that cow, actually, depending on how you feed it, are you feeding it pasture raised, and that's what you're saying for the acre? Because if it's in the pasture, that cow is also contributing a lot to the environment, especially that pasture itself, and it's a form of carbon capture. So there's a lot of regenerative farmers out there that would tell you that is way better than that field of nuts, which will be leaching all sorts of nutrients from the ground.
I'm actually in the agri industry, so I don't know why I didn't bring this up. So the nuts, so say like almonds actually create deserts. So because it's a monoculture, not saying a lot of other crops are any better, but there's like hundreds of acres of just almond trees. It looks very pretty. I love almonds. Everyone loves almonds, but there's nothing else there. There's no other vegetation. There's no other wildlife. Bees and natural pollinators struggle hard because one, the flowers are already poisonous, but two, they again, it's the only flower there. So that's it. If you're not specialized and if you can't just absorb the right amount of nutrients from those flowers, like it kills off a lot of native pollinators.
And aren't those trees terrible for water?
Yeah.
As far as demand.
Have you ever seen them grow in California? Have you ever seen these pictures? Maybe
I've seen them before.
They're literally just growing them in a desert.
It's just dirt all around them. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think people are just too.
Oh my gosh, you're
optimistic.
definitely right about that. Holy cow.
Yeah, there's a ton of water that goes into it. But again, a lot of the row crops, we have become super, super efficient at growing that. It's like wheat, corn, things like that.
Yeah, this is pretty. I'm gonna pull this up on the thing.
I hope they are actually.
Yeah.
What are they growing in that chicken manure? Because I think you actually have to rotate that for like 3 years before you're allowed to plant human food in it.
Yeah,
chicken. No, you can use chicken manure pretty quick. Actually,
it's at least a year, man. Because I looked this up. I had chickens and I would use it for my garden, but I had to rotate it.
No, so that's what we did. We waited at least a year. We mixed it in with a lot of other stuff.
So it's really not into the dirt with I think for cows, you can literally just like spread it.
Yeah, they just put it on. I'm pretty sure.
That's because the cow manure is actually very nutrient rich and it's pretty clean.
It doesn't have uric acid. That's the reason.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it where they bring it out there right from they're just loading up those tankers with cow manure and bringing it out there.
There's a lot of cow farmers near me because of where I live. And a lot of them are selling the manure literally out of the back of their house.
It's one of those things. There's a reason why we still have cows and stuff, and it's not just because they're delicious, because they are. They literally are still the most efficient thing. So if farmers could make more money on doing something else, they would. That the industry would just switch overnight.
All right, should we move on to the next chapter?
I think the next 3 chapters could just be one chapter, like one discussion. Because they're all tied together.
Yeah, they are. You've got essentially like saving nature is BOMB. I'm not going to say that word because that word will get us demonetized on YouTube. We've also got the destroying the environment to save it, and then all about the green. I do love. Okay, since we're on Twitter, I do want to go into this because Elon Musk said something so false it made me like.
Oh, you're talking about him with the desert solar that he could power the country?
Solar is so inefficient. And is not like the only people that solar is good for is people trying to go off grid.
It's an emergency power source, Chris.
I'm saying like if you're like one of those people that's like a survivalist in the middle of like a forest somewhere, and you build a little like structure to live in, that's probably the only place where I would say, oh yeah, go ahead, build yourself some solar, like because you don't need electricity in the first place.
Chris, but I'll say this: that is timed obsolescence. You have to understand that is a time that comes
20
with
years at most is what you
that is I need to transition off of, I need to have some form of electricity while I transition off of electricity, because obviously you're not going to be able to power something reliably anyway.
Survivalist mentality.
But it's the survivalist mentality of not even realizing. You have to realize that you're not going to have electricity forever. That you're eventually going to lose it when
your efficiency of electricity will go down over time.
That too, yeah. I'm just saying, like, when you install that, you have to recognize that in the prepper mindset, that eventually you're going to lose your electricity because solar has a really terrible life expectancy, and you're not going to be able to replace
the best panels being developed today are still
25 years.
Only guaranteed for about 25 years.
Yeah, but the 25 years is not at peak efficiency.
It's to 80%.
It's to 80%. So
you can only guarantee power for a solar panel at 80% for any given period of time.
And I would argue that is an overly optimistic take. 25 years is overly optimistic. People forget that temperature damages them. People seem to forget that efficiency goes way down the hotter it is. So
dude, I always buy half a cow at a time. Just so you know, Mike. So I have a freezer specifically for that because that's the best way to buy a cow. I agree. Same with a chicken. If you buy the whole chicken at the store, it's way more
half
efficient.
Chicken. That's the way to go.
No, I'm saying because you buy like 3 breasts, it's like $10, but you buy a whole chicken, it's like $6.
Even a duck. If you buy a duck from like the farmer's market, that's also a good way.
It's cheaper and it's more efficient use of the meat. Anyways, continue on with this green power thing, Andrew.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No,
I just saw Mike's comment. I had to address it.
Everyone forgets. Right, everyone forgets that solar has a lot of issues. Temperature is a huge issue. The hotter those panels get, the less efficient they get.
Yeah.
The batteries themselves that you rely on to store the energy, those are not just a short lifespan. You have to replace them every so often, but they're also highly temperature sensitive as well. This is what I was going to say because everyone likes to reference the batteries. for the Teslas and everything, the life expectancy of those batteries is still a question mark. Not just that, if you get any damage to a battery, it becomes extremely unstable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look
And
at all the lithium battery fires out there.
Well, but think about this. Car insurance companies are actually considering not insuring you if you have an electric vehicle, because the second you get into any form of a car accident, based on where the battery, how much
they can't put them out.
Not just about putting out the fire, but like the issue is if there's any potential damage to the battery, they have to replace the battery. But it's cheaper to get you a new car than to replace the battery on the existing car that it has damage to it. So there's a lot of waste, so much waste with the electric batteries.
Okay, but Mike brings up a thing that I want to address. Everything he says for solar is return on investment is 10 years. That includes that means you're getting a government subsidy, because 9 times out of 10 a solar installation comes with a government subsidy. On top of that, you're not factoring recycling costs at the year 20 that you're going to have to pay to get rid of those panels, and that is not cheap. And the third thing they're not factoring in is
replacement batteries.
The third thing that they're not factoring in is the amount of time you're going to have to use grid electric to make up for the inefficiency of the solar panels, especially in the winter.
Mm.
And you'd have to clean them in the winter in order to use them anytime there would be snowfall.
Also,
and cleaning them is not easy because they're very, very delicate.
Chris, aren't they usually, from my experience of looking into it, they're usually overly optimistic about the number of sun days you have in how many days of sun that you have in your region.
The only way a solar panel installation makes sense is if you're in a peak sun area all year round.
All right, I just want to bring up a quick biology thing. So solar, I think one day this would be a great thing. We're not quite there yet, but just think about how inefficient this is. So plants obviously photosynthesize. They're only collecting what is it? It's less than 10% of the sun's energy. They can convert it into their own energy into sugars. And they've had about 3 billion years to perfect that. And they have yet to figure it out. So, and they don't really move. So do you see plants being all that active? There's a reason. They're super inefficient in producing sugar, which, is the energy form that they're coming from photosynthesis. Humans have the audacity of thinking we're going to perfect this in 50 years, 50 years before now. And we're less efficient at collecting the sun's energy than those plants are. And I think that's something that is an important perspective to have, it's really, really hard to do that.
So just to say one thing, though, as a nuke, I'm more of a fan of nuclear energy because no matter what happens, solar will never rival nuclear power's energy density.
No, not unless we unlock some kind of secret mystery.
Exactly. And
that's a fact. Like, as an electrical engineer myself, the power, and then the other half of that is how stable is the delivery of the electricity you're getting from solar? It's not.
Yeah.
And so you have to have some intermediary for solar, which would be a battery.
Well,
you also have to have some backup, which is extremely inefficient, because if you have to back up 100% of the solar installation with something else because of the inactivity of one day of no sun,
so my argument
there's no way to do it.
Is that if it was as viable as like a coal factory, we could literally just replace the factory. We can put in the solar panels that take up the same amount of space and just have the energy generation go into the same grid that we have now. The thing is, your earlier points, it's not there, which is why you have to. They're not putting in the infrastructure. They're not investing in how to store it properly.
No, they're not.
So
he brings up something that a lot of people say. Nuclear waste is nasty. I don't know who H3 is.
Helium.
Oh, He3. Okay, different. Yeah. H3 is different. I was gonna say what? The fact is, nuclear plants now. I don't know if this has always been the case, but it's been the case for quite some time now. Nuclear waste is stored on site at most of these facilities, and he covers that in the book. They're in these giant casks that will survive nuclear war. You're not looking at like a ticking time bomb sitting on site.
But But here's the thing everyone forgets. Because of non-proliferation rules, we're not doing anything but wanting to just store the waste. that waste has so much energy potential in it still. It's
if
not
we shipped it to
waste.
France, they could reuse it.
That is 100% a resource that next generation nuclear power would utilize.
And they'll probably
It's
buy the old casks.
yeah, no, that is not a waste. That is actual like resources with a lot of potential energy utilization.
I would look at it more as energy storage than energy
It is.
waste.
It's a battery. Now nuclear is a battery
Yeah.
in a sense. It's a
very efficient
nature's battery, and it's extremely efficient. The thing that I would like to point out that with solar, it's what is solar energy doing? What is it doing? It is capturing energy given off by a giant nuclear reactor in in space.
This is
Okay,
true.
so if you can go directly to the source and have your own nuclear reactors, be it fusion or fission, I don't really care if you can get either one to work. I'm a fan. All right, that is going to be way more efficient, way more as far as resources used, material wise and land wise. It's going to be way more efficient. Now,
That is true. I agree.
solar, everyone likes to talk about solar, but they lie to you because they are comparing oranges to apples here. They ignore the fact that for every watt that you build with solar, you have to have a backup source.
Yes.
It has to exist. All right.
They
That is
wouldn't regulate you to that degree if it wasn't necessary.
Exactly. So they never though apply the cost of having 100% standby electricity ready to go. You're forgetting that you have to have all of the logistics in place to fuel that base load backup that is there to turn on at a moment's notice. You're forgetting the increased wear and tear costs because here's the thing about base load power sources. They want to start, they want to run, and they don't want to stop running. Otherwise, you are making parts that don't need to go through different vibrations and resonant frequencies go through things that cause damage to them. It's like driving your car. You get less fuel efficiency when you're starting and stopping in the city versus driving on the freeway. Mm-hmm. The battery aspect is usually left out of most solar and wind costs. And going back to a comment that Mike Little had in that's okay. Mike Little's comment: solar is more profitable in those areas than gas or coal, and he's referencing Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Well, just out of reference, one of the greatest nuclear power plants in the country for production is in Arizona. Actually, despite water problems there, they have it working perfectly fine. You have California and Texas, which are like 1 and 2 for how many renewable sources between wind and solar are on their grid, and they're also the 2 least stable electrical grids in the country. They have
Texas and California have completely different reasons for having those issues, but
both of them have
Andrew,
most.
I don't want to turn this into. In fact, maybe what we should do in the future is an episode where Will doesn't necessarily want to join in. We'll do a literal discussion on power on its
Fine.
own.
I'm just saying.
When Chris does one joining, we can talk about evolution.
All right. Here's the thing I do want to get to though, Andrew.
Well, wait. Let's talk about just destroying the environment real quick.
That's what I wanted to say.
No, but I'm just saying he's talking about in this part, right? Everyone forgets about how solar they are destroying that desert environment. That's a legitimate biome, right?
You're shading a desert that has animals and natural shrubbery.
It's also super hot, and it doesn't cool down.
People, they're moving tortoises. So much for them caring about the tortoises, right? They move them, and they're one of those creatures that can't handle even momentary captivity or that level of shock to their system. And they just die. Despite being moved to another location that might be habitable for them, they can't handle that human interaction at all, and they die. Okay.
The fact of the matter is solar and wind kill animals. Just as much as anything else, if not more.
Solar kills birds that fly over it.
Yep.
And
they also have to think about, why do so many birds die from the wind turbines? Well, it's because in order to capture the wind, you're putting them in the natural migratory patterns of the birds where the wind is strong.
But you're forgetting something that's key. It's not just birds. we don't care about birds. Environmentalists don't care about just regular birds. They'll reference how cats
Endangered
kill more
birds,
birds.
predatory birds.
It's talking about predatory birds, large, high on the food chain birds, right?
Save the pterodactyls.
That literally have a 3-year breeding cycle. So you're killing them before they can even breed.
Yeah.
And you're also killing the bugs because the wind turbines are in the migratory pattern of bugs. They're killing the bats.
Will cares about bugs.
Yes.
They're killing the bats, so you're getting both types of pollinators right there, bugs and bats. And not just that, now since this book has come out, the offshore wind is killing whales.
Yeah, and they also talk about how the underwater power thing, which is extremely inefficient, does damage to the ocean ecosystem as well. I've found that recently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want to quickly summarize this last piece because I don't want to keep Will up past his bedtime. But I just want to point out that the number one thing killing nuclear is not its safety or any of the perspectives that people have brought up over the years. It's public perception and the politics of natural gas and coal that have been preventing nuclear from taking hold where it should have taken hold years ago. Nuclear is the most efficient, and now because of all the regulatory issues, probably the most safe way to produce energy based on all of the safety features nuclear plants require to even start up. There's like no chance that a nuclear plant is less safe than a coal plant. A coal plant's going to do more damage. Natural gas plant's going to do more damage. Wind and solar is going to do more damage. Most of the nuclear plants wind up being nature refuges around the plant because you have to have such a wide acreage to build one. And you end up saving bald eagles and all kinds of other conservationist efforts. Nuclear is one of the cleanest and most efficient and most conservationist friendly energies out there.
Well, nuclear, it can be the cleanest, especially the next generation.
Next gen is extremely clean, extremely safe. They're implementing inherently safe mechanisms so that it fails safe no matter what.
Right. Passive instead of active systems means you don't require electricity to be safe.
The key to it, though, is if you want to see who's the biggest funder behind wind and solar, it's natural gas.
Yes, because they're required to exist to back them up.
Yes. The only plants that get built as backup to wind and solar are natural gas, and that requires a lot of logistics framework too. So there's a lot of money to be made there. But you also have to look about how in that chapter all about the green, there's a lot of corruption. A lot of corruption that is talked about in this, specifically in California.
Andrew, we don't have a lot of time to get into that.
I was going to summarize it real quick.
Go ahead.
As far as
something fiery in the chat real quick, being you're talking about California.
As far as California goes, you have it where the governor at the time came out extremely anti-nuclear, but was also highly incentivized because his father had the sole importation license for Indonesian crude and went so far as to pass laws and air quality standards specifically to eliminate all other forms of crude oil from the market. So
because of the purity of the
because of the sulfur. Yeah. The sulfur content. So he used sulfur content as a way to prevent the Alaskan oil companies from building a pipeline to California because their oil would not be sold. And then the entire time he now had a monopoly on bringing oil into the state of California because only the oil from Indonesia was acceptable.
Yep, that was a crazy thing to find out.
Yes.
And then the other aspect of this, the thing about denial of power. This was so interesting to me because I never thought about it in this way. I'll summarize it very quickly. But basically, by refusing to allow coal plants, natural gas plants, the normal baseline of an industrial society from being built in these countries, the supposed leapfrogging into solar and wind instead of starting with coal for industrialization purposes, being a politically damaging aspect of these, poverty to prosperity civilization experiments has destroyed these countries because you have unreliable power. You can't build factories. You can't build the necessary building blocks of a first world nation because you don't have the reliability of the power that everybody else who industrialized had. And I was just like, wow, like when he summarized it that quickly, I was like,
when you brought up
dang.
the fact that the companies that like in the Western hemisphere, they're incentivized to keeping these smaller countries down because they can have cheap labor that way. So instead of allowing them to industrialize and then protect their own ecosystems, they're incentivized to impoverish these countries, which further destroys their ecosystems, but they can make money off of saying that they're helping them. It's like a whole crazy industry that they've made through these back channels.
It's like the savior industry. We're saving you by building wind and solar, but instead you're in a perpetual cycle of poverty because
well, it's not even just the wind and solar. It's just
impoverished.
like basically anything they touch there, they're not doing it to help them. They're not doing it to save the environment. They're exploiting.
Well, also before Fukushima, we were on the pathway of working with these countries to get them access to more nuclear power.
Yes.
There was a whole initiative to try to basically have it where the United States would implement non-proliferation rules and aspects to the sharing of nuclear power, and they would basically maintain control of the material.
Africa, if we gave them nuclear, if the entire continent was using nuclear, that it would solve so many problems just giving them energy.
Well, it's just the fact that industrialization inherently breeds less crime. There's less crime. There's less warring factions when you have prosperity. It's a fact. The more poverty you have, the more crime you have.
Yes.
Just because people need to live.
Yeah.
It's the whole crisis argument, right? People don't do these things unless they're in crisis, dire straits, or those types of situations. You don't find crime as a business that's lucrative in an area where prosperity is big. All right, the last piece, though. Andrew, I know you love this part. The last piece.
Oh, gosh.
The whole idea of climate science being a religion. I mean, I've always kind of thought that, but he put it as a substitute for Judeo-Christianity. It makes sense. It is earth worship, literally. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean you should be a bad steward to the land you own or the land you're taking care of.
I mean, even if let's say that you are Christian and you really fully believe it, you are supposed to be a steward. That is the role of humanity. So you're not supposed to destroy what we have.
The difference is that this is self-sacrifice to the earth,
right? In
how they execute it. Whereas, how I think all of us believe, you're supposed to strive to survive and thrive, but also do that while using the least amount of resources necessary. So you're constantly looking at efficiencies and improving your technology.
Consumerism is not the answer, although that is where we are right now. A lot of this country, like the United States in general, Europe, all that stuff.
I think
there's a lot that
he points out is that people are the self-sacrifice thing that Andrew's bringing up, but it's for everyone else, not for me. So it's like you still want your Starbucks, you still want your cheap clothing, you still want your cheap goods, you still want to all of the wonderful benefits that we have right now, but you want to deny it to everybody else. That's the problem, and he brings it up several times in the book. It's like, I hear people talk about this all the time, where it's like, where do we put these these preserves in other countries, in like the poorest freaking areas? And again, now these people can no longer hunt. They're starving. You have the elephants coming over destroying the crops, so it's not they can't grow crops, and no one cares about that. They're just like, okay, well, I feel good now that there's this preserve. They don't ever think about the ramifications to the human population that's there.
Right. There's also a ton of ignorance. There just is, right? There's people who've never looked into it ever. The reason they like wind and solar so much is because they just hear wind and solar. Oh, wind is all around me. It's nature. Solar is all around me. It's nature. And while doing that, they're creating some weird dystopian industrial wasteland of these wind turbines and solar panels everywhere, just blighting the landscape and your views. You're not seeing nature anymore. You're seeing this dystopian garbage everywhere. Chris, there was someone shared a really good reference with the Twitter account.
Did they?
It's a 50-second video that shows the scale, and it was on your first tweet about us doing the book from May 25th.
Oh, okay.
So there's a video that shows the size of power plant, basically the scale of land usage from a nuclear plant to wind turbines, and it's referencing Norway specifically.
Let me find it.
No, and the fact that the European countries are now converting back to nuclear energy.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Hold on, let me pull it up. Let me pull it up right now.
So this just for reference to everybody, this really shows you the land usage, and it shows right now in the video. You'll see a nuclear plant and 3 different types of turbines. It shows you the square footage and how many megawatts each one produces, and right there, it's zooming out right now to show how many wind turbines, and it's showing it overlaid on a map.
Yeah, it takes a lot of wind and solar to make up for an industrial power plant.
Yeah.
This is
So when you just see, if you're watching this, I encourage everyone to actually look at the video right now for this, or go to our Twitter page and you'll see it. Maybe we'll retweet it. But it really just lays out the clear picture that if you're anti-nuclear in favor of wind and solar, you don't actually care about preserving the environment and land, because the proper way to do that is 100% nuclear. You use so much your footprint, that is reducing your footprint right there.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
People just think about it as the big building. They don't realize how many towers across, how much land it's going to take to act. Because they think, oh, one turbine is one power plant. No. So the energy density of one turbine is nowhere near the energy density of one industrial nuclear building.
Yep.
Exactly. And that's where people are just, they're on the good feelings, good vibes train. They're not on the this is the facts train.
Yeah, get on the good vibes that nuclear is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing everything you want to do. Saving the environment, less of a footprint, cleaner energy, more energy for people. We can even help underdeveloped nations start building these and giving them clean energy and everything.
And I guarantee if you want to work with your local nuclear power plant to try to do some initiative for wildlife, most of them are a wildlife refuge.
Yes.
I've personally been to 5 nuclear power plants to see, and I've seen what they look like. There's plenty of wildlife thriving in the areas. I know of one nuclear power plant down in Florida, Port St. Lucie. There, they have a sea turtle hatchery on their they have sea turtles hatching every year. They brag about it on their website. Okay, I really encourage you to look into how all of your nuclear power plants are great for the environment, because they like to tout it, and sometimes they don't tout it enough, but they do a lot.
All right, so I don't want to. I promised Will 10 minutes, like 15 minutes ago. So
yeah.
Here's what I want to do now. What's the next thing on our syllabus, Andrew? You've got it up somewhere.
On our syllabus.
The book? Are we rating the
book?
book?
Yeah, we have to rate this book.
All right.
Actually, lessons learned. learned.
I think we've done a lot of lessons.
I know. I mean,
already.
Honestly,
as
to
they went
summarize
chapter
it,
by chapter with this book.
Honestly, to summarize it though, it would be, look for the hidden motives. We didn't really get into the corruption enough, I don't think, but there's a lot of hidden motives behind everybody who's pushing some sort of agenda. Yes. So you should really look into the details for yourselves and try to look at it from a facts-based perspective. You'll see a lot of things that are scaremongering and emotions-based, but not facts.
I'll tell you what I learned, and it's not just in this book, but in general. Never trust a nonprofit blindly.
Yes.
Ever.
They're getting donations from somewhere.
Always look behind the scenes.
Well, never trust people in general. You should definitely, if they're trying to take money from you.
It's okay to trust people.
If they're trying to take money from you, don't trust them. You have to look into it.
Yes, never trust a person asking for money and not giving you all the details.
Yeah.
I would say almost always delay a donation unless you know the organization or the people involved, until you do the research and find out where your money's going.
Frankly, I don't like donating to multinational organizations. That's just me. I'd rather donate locally.
I also would say one last thing. I will never eat synthetic beef. Sorry. I will.
So how do you guys rate it? Rate the book.
I say 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. There's a couple things that, although the carbon neutral aspect with the rainforest, I know a lot about biodiversity. I know the redundancy, so it wasn't that it was necessarily surprising, and it's never put those together that the rainforest really doesn't produce as much as everyone thinks it does. I already knew about the algae doing most of the oxygen production for the world, but yeah.
I mean, theoretically, you could say coal is carbon neutral too.
Just real quick,
Just saying.
Mike, we're not saying not to donate to nonprofits.
Yeah, we're not saying that there aren't good
We're saying
ones.
don't
We're saying
trust
gotta look
them
into it.
blindly.
Don't
give
it.
blind trust to a nonprofit. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, sorry.
Obviously,
we're
you've done your
unclear.
research. You've picked your charities. You're fine. Do your thing. All right. I give it a 4 out of 5. I think it's really well done, but I save my 5s for C.S. Lewis. No, I'm just kidding. I save my 5s for very specific things. It's a good book. I just wouldn't have picked
Chris
it
rates
myself.
it 0 out of 5. Not enough religion.
No,
No,
talk about religion.
There's plenty of religion in this book.
Just not his religion.
4 out of 5. All right, keep going.
I give it a 5 out of 5 specifically because I'm factoring in his target audience.
Yeah,
I think it's great for normies to read this. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm just saying, based on who his target audience is, if they can read the book, then
but I don't consider target audience. I consider. I
think the book is fantastic. I do think the book is fantastic. Yes. Even like I was entertained by it a lot, but especially when I factor in who his target audience is, it's a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's a lot of information at once. It's a lot of complicated topics. Everyone already has opinions on these things, so there's things like I agreed with, disagreed with, and very strongly, just because that's the environment that we're growing up in. Yeah. And he did a very good job of presenting things, presenting the facts,
and the receipts,
not getting emotional. It was good, and then not insulting you, or if you believed one way or the other, he does not insult you. He just says like, "This is where you led astray," or "This is where you're correct," that kind of thing.
And I'd like to add the notes. He has all the notes.
Yes,
he has notes.
And I think as far as a discussion with other people, this is a highly, highly good book for that.
Yeah,
it's.
I mean, look at all these notes.
Yeah, I mean, he has so many references in this that I don't think this is a book that someone's going to really argue that he got it wrong.
My biggest compliment to the author is he doesn't just talk about his research. He talks about going there and doing his own research. And that's something that's missing from a lot of authors, writers, etc. these days, especially scientists. They just accept raw data given to them by somebody else and just pretend like that's... you don't need to do your own thing. This guy said, I'm going to go check it out.
Well, he gives you the human perspective, which is hard to show through just data crunching. So just actually interviewing someone about their lifestyle, what the elephants mean to them, or the baboons, I think it was an example. Instead of just saying, well, this is the number of fields that were destroyed today, blah, blah. It's like you don't have that emotional connection. So he is, again, target audience. A lot of people have an emotional appeal to one side of the argument. He's making the emotional appeal for the other side. So... with also presenting data.
I really love too how he goes through the history of the catastrophes and really shows how the way that you actually get through them. I don't think that's done enough, and I think more professions would benefit from having a history course geared a little bit towards what they actually do.
Oh, one last thing that did stick out to me, I'll just point this out. There was a point in there where he said something along the lines of unmanageable crisis, and how he asked the author to define the word, or unmitigated, I don't know, whatever it was. And he calls it, well, what do you mean by unmanageable? He's like, well, we wouldn't be able to manage it. People would have to leave their homes for a couple days and come back. You're like, oh, so you're not saying that the land would never be able to be recovered. You're saying that people wouldn't be able to manage their lives. Yeah, so the way people use words on their own can be, like, that's something I learned from this book.
Semantics.
Like, everybody defines things differently.
Yeah, and it's alarmism. So like they use the strongest words possible to make you alarmed. And then you actually get to the bottom of it, you're like, oh, well, I would have to like move my house like 100 feet in.
Or I'd have to leave my house for a couple days while the storm rolls through.
Well, some of it was really simple. Like, again, like you would just have to move like a mile away. It's like, I mean, this is a industrialized nation. That's not that hard for us.
Yeah.
Or you build a new dike.
Yeah, or a new dike. Overcome.
Yeah.
Right. Like humanity can overcome these things. All right. I think that's it. Is there any, Mike, did you have any questions? Anybody in the audience? I saw there was a comment on Rumble, but then I read it and I was like, oh, okay. It's a, I'm not going to show it on screen.
Not a good one. Yeah.
No. It was it was somebody having Christian revelations in our comment section. How they found the Lord and this. I was like, oh, great. All right.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
We don't have that kind of nonsense right here.
No, we just don't read that kind of stuff on our podcast in the middle of the podcast. Let's see here. And then Mike says, oh, fun. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the podcast. All right. Yeah. If that's it, then that's all I've got. Anybody else?
Well, we should just remind everybody that the next book is what, Chris?
Prince Caspian, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Prince Caspian.
Are you gonna watch the movie?
I have been informed about how bad it is, so we'll see.
You told me that the White Witch is not in this. I haven't read the book yet, but you told me that the White Witch is not in this book, but she's in the movie, so I'm very confused.
I don't know if she is or not. I don't remember. So if Andrew said it, then he's probably true. He's probably right.
Okay, I need you to read the book and then watch the movie and tell me that you still think the movie is good, because
I've never seen
it. Was good to begin with. I thought it was terrible.
Okay. I'm just saying. But yeah, so the next book will be Prince Caspian, and that is 2 weeks from now.
Well, 2 weeks from now.
The entire time I was just confused why Peter didn't just destroy them, because you're helping someone else take over your kingdom. That doesn't make any sense. You're the king. Take it back. That's all I thought the entire time.
It's because of Aslan, man.
Yeah.
All right.
But on that note, make sure you guys join our Goodreads or our book club. I'll drop links in YouTube and stuff later.
Follow us on Twitter.
Yep, at Krillcast, at Printed and Pressed. And we're going to go. See y'all on the next one. As always, I'm Chris.
And I'm Will.
And I'm Andrew.
And we'll see you on the next Printed and Pressed.